This is something that's been brewing for a long time, right? And that is specific to the police encounter, right? Another thing that comes into play with Los Angeles Police Department, where a lot of the people from the LAPD were pulled from the South, right? A lot of people who make up the LAPD were pulled from these segregationist areas. So a lot of those mentalities that were carried from the South, just like we have Blacks fleeing these circumstances to come to California, the LAPD are picking up people who believe in these ideas and placing them in the police department in Los Angeles. So there's a tension that's been developing within Blacks and police since the inception of this thing we call California or LA, right? So again, this is not a new phenomenon. You hear things like the Black body being depicted as animalistic, right? Monkeys in the zoo was used. The jungle and gorillas was used on several times, right? Also, what I found with great importance was the role in of the camera, right? So you see snapshots of what happened in 65, but what happens in 92, you see a capture of this whole thing take place, right? And the police, of course, are unaware that they're being filmed, and they're really in their true state, right? And so one, being attentive to the role of the camera, and then also when the rebellion kicks off, the way that the media is viewed and the way that the media becomes attacked in the midst of the rebellion also was something I was attentive to as well. I found it interesting that Rodney King himself didn't want to make it about race, right? They were very intentional about saying that this was not a racial issue. Also, I thought it was interesting, right, that the officers involved were actually indicted and arrested. Like, to me, that was phenomenal, because even in our time now, that rarely happens, right? The idea, so, and then too, I thought was interesting when we have the tension kind of come to fold with the Korean store owners, and then Latasha Harlan getting murdered, right? The judge's response of, "I know what a criminal looks like," right? And I found that extremely interesting also, because the woman who committed murder, right, does not look like a criminal. So I'm curious to who she feels or what she feels a criminal would look like, right? I would assume it's somebody occupying darker skin tone or darker complexion. So as it pertains to the actual murder as it pertains to the beating of Rodney King, you have the the courthouse being moved to Simi Valley, right? They feel that LA is not a place where you will be able to get a fair trial because an emotional tension of the event. So we're going to move the trial to Simi Valley, which they say is 85% white. And then so also when they show a clip of the police officer getting out of the car to go to court, he almost gets his car hit, and he tells one of the reporters, "If you hit my car, we're going to have another Rodney King incident." So to me, if that's not an implication of guilt, I don't know what is, right? He's telling you, if you bump my car, I'm going to beat your ass like I beat Rodney King's ass, right? So this kind of gives you insight into the mentality of the police department. Also, one of the things that for me that just really leaped off of this documentary is just like, it's not all Trump's fault, right? You see the things that they're dealing with in 92, that's not under Trump's administration, right? So a lot of these things that we're dealing with in our now, that we're pinning on him, in our reality, they go way further and way deeper than him, right? And again, I'm not to absolve him of his role in any of this, but just to be critical of this, of our society, and to critique our society, we have to know that we cannot just place all the blame on Trump, right? So they get the verdict of not guilty, and then you see the tension boil over in the city. So I brought up the gangs earlier in the conversation, but in the midst of the rebellion, the gangs become fundamental. And if you're paying close attention, they're the ones who carve out the border of who can enter South LA and who could not, right? So you hear them say, Mexicans, they get a pass, right? white folks, they get no pass, and Asians get no pass, right? And they're literally carving out who has entry into South Los Angeles and who does not have entry into South Los Angeles, right? So the gang culture is setting the border as to who gets a pass in those areas. And if you're watching closely, he makes his claim as to who could get the pass and who can't, and then he'll throw up his set, right? When you see a lot of the violence taking place, they're throwing up sets, right? When Reginald Denny gets pulled out of the car and gets hit in the head with the brick, they're throwing up their set. So a lot of this is the gang culture that's taking place, right? Even in the way that a lot of the stores that were attacked it was done in a methodical order, right? A highly large number of the stores that were burnt and looted where the store owners were Korean, right? And that ties directly to the situation with LaTarsha Harlan. So again, the role of gangs can't be glossed over. And then to me, just the fact that as things got out of hand, the fire department and the police just took a hands-off approach to just let things continue for a number of days until the National Guard gets brought in, right? Then I thought about the Korean store owners' response to the looting by arming themselves. And I was very attentive to how organized they were and their response to the quote unquote looting. But what that also prompted in my mind, just this week, Florida has extended their stand their ground law to where now if someone is quote unquote looting, you have the right by Florida law to shoot and kill them, right? So this is an extension of the stand your ground. So they said in the film that there was 916 structure fires. Like that's just a phenomenal amount to me. And then too, right? Like arson was a very big thing. Like you see like one scene where there is an actual arsonist, and for me, I seen mental health jump off the screen with that particular individual. So I think that's another thing that comes into play when you look at the circumstances of 92. There's a large, when you look at LA's homeless population, a large population of them are dealing with mental health issues, right? I'm gonna put a pause on what I'm gonna say, and because I'm really more curious to hear from you guys. So we'll open it up to fish bowling. We'll take 4 people for the fish bowl. Do I have any volunteers for the fish bowl?
Has everyone fish bowled? Because if they have, I'll volunteer.
I'm inclined to say no.
I have not.
I have not. I can go.
Okay, so
I can go after Ethan.
okay, we have Justine and Ethan, and we're gonna do 4, so we can get 2 more in there.
I could go. I haven't gone either.
Okay, Brett, and 1 more. Oh, Wendy, I seen you in the chat. Okay. So for our fish bowl, we have Ethan, Justine, Brett, and Wendy. Okay. All right, so the floor is yours.
Okay, I guess I'll start. Yeah, I agree with a lot of what you said, Professor, with just how this didn't start with Trump, just like historically speaking, like that's the funny thing about the way the history books are written is that they'll talk about the civil rights movement and they'll talk about the 50s and the 60s. But there were Black people fighting for civil rights from the moment they were brought here as slaves. Like when they had slavery, you had people not wanting to be slaves. You had people resisting slavery. It was just the 50s when white people thought this is an inconvenience. We have to kind of think about this. And I think that's just kind of like, just kind of the way people think about social progress. Every generation is faced with the same problems because they don't just pick up right after the next generation. People have to relearn that stuff. And if you're young, you don't learn about it, you're not going to just by the grace of God somehow move forward socially. Like the generations have to communicate with each other and you have to be aware of what worked and what didn't work and what happened. And just with this case, like this 90s phenomenon, it's like it could have happened any time, really. It was just like you said, all the cameras, how much it was so clear that you couldn't deny it, that you couldn't glaze over it. And it's, to me, like the response, like the rioting, it's like yeah, it looks bad. And I know like my parents have told me, because both of my parents were attorneys at the time in LA. So they would have to drive through some of those areas, and they would tell me about, how crazy it looked and how scary it was and all that. But, and I understand that it's, it's scary, and it's like you're going to work and you're just trying to go through your life. And it's like people are burning stuff down and it's scary. But at the same time, it's like, you know, police going without any accountability, harming people and assaulting people and killing people and sexually assaulting people, lying and never having any account. That's scary too. Like that's scary as hell that people can get away with that. And like you said, like all these cops coming from the South. And the other funny thing about history is like the amount of racism throughout the country. Like it wasn't just in the South. Like even in the Civil War, you had tons of Union soldiers who hated black people. And you had when black people migrated to the North, they were always put in the worst areas and treated the worst and were exposed to the most pollution and all that. So it's like people don't understand the breadth and the depth of the racism in America. They don't understand how all these areas need to clean up their act, need to air out their dirty laundry. So, I thought, it's obviously really important that documentaries need to be made about this, just because, when it's something this important, people are like, oh, well, everyone remembers Rodney, all the details and all the nuances and everyone's actual perspectives and what people actually do. You just kind of vaguely remember there was police brutality. And the other thing is like when the riots ended, police brutality didn't end. So how much was accomplished? And I think people like to imagine progress is greater than it is and be like, oh, well, the riots ended and we all remember that and we all understand that that was wrong, that Rodney King was beaten by the cops. But how many people are actually like paying attention to every single case of police brutality, and how many people are actually calling up their Congress people or their city council people saying what the hell's going on? Like, not a very big numbers. So, yeah, that's just my reaction.
Yo, thank you, Ethan. That was really profound, man. Just your assessment of our society, man, to me was spot on. The only amendment that I would make, right? There were no slaves. There were African people who were enslaved, right? So slavery was a
Yes,
circumstance,
certainly.
condition, not a description of someone who someone was. And that's not only to you, Ethan. That's to
Absolutely.
everyone,
Yeah.
right? So like, it's really for me. It's really important that we be attentive to language, because that also shapes the way that we view things, right? So even something as simple
Yeah,
as,
definitely.
yeah, enslaved, right? It drastically changes the
Yeah, I understand.
situation. Yeah, and again, Ethan, I'm not even talking to you. I'm saying this
Yeah.
more in a general context, but you allowed me to go into that conversation. But thank you for that, man.
Yeah, absolutely understand.
Next up.
Yeah, so I guess piggybacking off of what Ethan was saying, I remember, I mean, me as a white woman growing up in Los Angeles, like even I've still had problems with police. Like I've never been in a situation where police have made me feel safe, only like I'm going to get in trouble for some reason. And like they don't trust me and I'm up to no good. And no matter what I say is not taken for a bit, like it's not taken seriously. I feel like police tend to like mow over the truth a lot to be able to like do their job proficiently, which is not a proficient job. And I think that systemic racism is like talked about a lot, but institutionalized racism isn't talked about. And I think that's a huge part of systemic racism. And, when people are questioning why there are cops of color engaging in police brutality as well. And it's like it goes back to the beginning. And like Ethan was saying, like, things have changed, but they're different. Nothing has really changed. Not a thing. In fact, it's gotten worse. And police have gotten bolder in their actions, and they think that they are going to be protected because that's what's been happening forever. the white man has always been protected, no matter what. And yeah, I think that that's number one, like disgusting, because like you can even go back to stories like To Kill a Mockingbird or A Time to Kill by Grisham and see that innocent people were treated unfairly and even killed for things that they had nothing to do with, simply because of the color of their skin. And it just like it never ended, and it's honestly, it's not going to end. This is something that's like ingrained in people from the minute they're born. What is the name of that white professor who does the experiment with the children in her class and says that the kids are with blue eyes?
Shit, I know you're talking about. I just, for some reason, her name escapes me.
She has a really
Jane Elliott.
yeah. She has a really awesome lecture up on YouTube. It's like from a long time ago, but it's like her telling this classroom, like explaining to children the concepts of racism and why it's a load of shit. And yeah, I don't know. It's wild to me that people still hold these beliefs. It's sad that people still hold these beliefs. And when you talk to people with these beliefs, they're so defensive of their beliefs that it's like that it's deterring from having the conversation with them in the first place. Because it's like, you know, I want to say you can't fix stupid, but at the same time, like there are really freaking intelligent people that hold these beliefs, and I don't know, it's scary. Like nothing has changed since Rodney was beaten. People are being killed. Rodney wasn't killed, and then Rodney didn't even like the riots that was happening. He wanted all of it to stop, but people are rioting because they're fed up. They're just done, man. Like, how long can you keep somebody down for? People aren't gonna, like, people have a breaking point and they're gonna reach it. And I think it's okay if things are effed up, freaking take it back. So I guess that's where I stand.
Yeah, I think one of the things that you said that really stood out to me also, as far as the policing has gotten worse. So like I'm watching the rebellions and the police are pretty civil. Like if you were to do a snapshot of what you saw in '92 versus what you've seen this summer, the police were a lot more brutal, right?
Absolutely.
Like there was no
I was out protesting when George Floyd was killed, like when when the protests were happening, and I was shot with tear gas and rubber bullets while people were literally looting 3rd Street Promenade right behind us. And they were just focused on a group of peaceful protesters while literally they were watching people run in and out of stores. So it's like, pick your struggle, cops, and they choose the wrong one, you know?
Yeah, and I think so. When you go to war, there's rules of engagement, right? And it is internationally illegal to use tear gas. Like y'all know that? Like, so.
Oh yeah, it's like, and I don't know if you guys know, but when tear gas hits you, it's not just your eyes, it burns your entire body, like everywhere. It was not a pleasant thing. And yeah, like I said, they're just getting bolder with their methods on how, I don't know, it's crazy that some of the things that they do gets by.
Yeah. So
civilians would never be able to behave like that.
Yeah. So
and the power struggle that comes with police too, where it's like this authoritative position, and people, like when you put somebody in a place of power, they don't know how to respect that or like cherish it, because you have a responsibility to uphold, not like huff and puff.
Yeah. I think that power brings a different interesting element to the conversation. And one of the things I heard you say was that you know, it's an intelligence issue, right? There's a very intelligent people who are still defending these ignorant positions. And to me, that's where power comes in, right? Because I'm assuming those individuals benefit from a power dynamic by holding those positions and holding those ideologies, right? So yes, one of the things is education, right? And that's a large reason why I do what I do, because I could attack this issue from that standpoint. But the larger issue and the real issue, it comes down to what you're talking about, Justine, is power, right?
Right.
And they're not willing, and power is not going to concede power without recognizing power, if that makes sense.
That makes a lot of sense. And it also leads to the question, like, not like when things will change, but will things change?
Well, and I'll say this: I'm a radical optimist, right? And if you look at history, it's going to change. This American civilization is a fairly young civilization. Because we're in the middle of it, it seems like it's pervasive. You know what I mean? But the way that things are going, it has to, right? And the way that this country is operating, the way that capitalism in effect works, is really it's the octopus that has its tentacles spread too thin, right? You can't have your hands in everything and then also take care of home at the same time, right? So we're really, in my estimation, if I were to do an analysis of our now, right, I think we're witnessing the fall of what we call this great American Western society. Like, to me, if you're really paying attention to what's going on, this is what we're in the midst of. And to me, as scary as that sounds, I'm more interested in the opportunity to build up new things, right?
And that leads me to say that I have like a lot of faith in our younger generations, because a lot of them are standing up to it comes down to the basic principle of right and wrong. And like, we're taught that at the very beginning of our lives. So kids are able to distinguish whether or not something is right or wrong, I guess, a lot better than they were able to 10 years ago. And they're not having it. These kids, like, I don't know, take Greta Thunberg, for example. Like, she's a 14-year-old environmentalist, and like, they just made a huge documentary about her. So yeah, I have a lot of faith in the younger generations to like build a better tomorrow.
It's always the youth, always the youth. Brett or Wendy, you guys want to jump in?
Yeah, just kind of thinking outside the box about it and reflecting on the whole, living through it. Because at the time I lived in Highland Park, and my dad got stuck at the LA Times because he worked there doing photo editing and graphic design. He's like, he couldn't even leave the building because of the rioting. And looking back now, it's like, to me, it seems like in the end, they still got Rodney King because they found him dead in Rialto in a swimming pool.
Yep.
After everything that's happened, and leading forward to like Trayvon Martin and all the senseless killing of young Black men and women in America, and for this to happen to Rodney King, and then in the end, I just see it as, you know what, they still got his ass. I feel like the system still got him, or they say he was on drugs, but he drowned in the pool, but he was a swimmer,
right?
And it's like, at what point does the narrative start to change? Even though he survived, even though he didn't want to pin race on it, it's like, it's this, no matter what we do and say, it's the same story over and over again. Because in the end, it's like, the way I see it is like, dang, we still got your Black ass. Right. Like it's just a lot to try to unpack. And also watching it, because I've watched it before, watching it again for this class, it's like, and it dawned on me, juxtaposing a slave master beating an African in America, and then you can put a picture of a police officer beating a Black man walking down the street. It doesn't matter whether it was the Watts riots or in Chicago or in New York, or even now, it's so institutionalized that by the color of your skin, you are automatically a suspect and you are a threat and danger to society. And going back to it, I know we talked about it like 2 weeks ago, the term super predator. Yeah. It's so institutionalized that, I'm glad these documentaries are made. you know, and for people that don't know, I'm glad that now they know.
Yeah.
You know, and that's pretty much, and I think we got a lot to fix still. A lot, because it's only been 65 years since segregation has ended.
Yeah, that's somebody's lifetime.
I think only 53 since interracial marriages has been allowed.
Yeah.
So it's just, things are moving so much that we honestly feel at times we can't even keep up with it.
Yeah.
But I'm glad there's documentaries and movies out there like LA 92, because it does shed a lot of light on the police brutality. So it's pretty much all I have.
13th is a great doc too.
Oh yeah, that one too. That one was
super poignant.
Yeah, and it adding to it, like you were saying, you know, because you can see the gang members throw up their gang signs and all that stuff too. At the same time, it's like you can't even be mad at them for rioting and looting. Like, I'm like, you know what? At this point, burn it down.
Yeah.
But at the same time, when you think about it, how they are trapped in like South Central and they're fighting to breathe to get out, it's the exact same thing as Jim Crow era with the Green Book on where Black people can and cannot go. It's okay to riot, but you only could riot in your own neighborhood. And when you do riot, you're the problem. But looking at when they did the Oklahoma Black Wall Street, it's okay for white people to burn, kill, and maim the Black community. So it's a lot of hypocrisy.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the word, man. And it's as if, not even as if, this country is founded and operates and is dependent upon hypocrisy, right? Like that's in the essence, that's the ethos of the country.
And on top of that, I really started to question, was America founded on Christian values? I don't know. I really don't know.
But I would say this, the way that Christianity has been manipulated, then yes, right? But if you go to the core, organic, real Christian values, absolutely not. But if you think about the way modernity has pimped Christianity for its own dealings, then it falls in line directly, right? And to me, that's why you could see someone like Donald Trump use preacher and use Christianity without batting an eye, right? Because it all fits within this idea of modernity, which used Christianity to justify enslavement, right? So I agree with you, Brett. Like, now something seems off there, but the way it has been manipulated brings it into alignment.
Yeah.
Wendy, you want to jump in?
Yeah, I just wanted to touch upon like how the media plays into the whole the way things have been projected, how especially this case, how the police department cared about how their image looked suddenly because it was caught on camera. It was caught on camera, everything, the evidence was there, the beatings of Mr. King, everything was there, but yet they got away with it. And then it's like same thing how like police brutality existed even before this was caught on camera. So it's truly crazy to me how suddenly the police department cared about their image, how they looked, when this should have been something to be talked about like years ago and stuff like that. And one quote that really regarding the case of the little girl, of how racism is not the Korean killing her, racism is the court system that allows her to kill her. That kind of touched me a lot because it's true, because the court system let the injustice of this little girl and not and also the 4 police officers beating up Mr. King.
Absolutely. And I think it was Justine who said it, like, you know, how much can a people take? You know what I mean? Like, and it's funny because they always try to peg Black people as inhuman. And to be real, the only thing inhuman about Black people is their capacity to put up with this type of shit.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because I think any other context, like, all of this shit is getting shut down, right? Like there's something within Black people that allows them, and I don't even know if it's a good thing. It could be to our detriment. I don't know, but there's a fungibility about us that allows us to put up and endure a lot. And I think, again, that's something that maybe need to be questioned, or that should be a conversation that we need to have within the community, because is it really serving us? Like, I mean, over 500 years to be dealing with the same problem it's a long time, bro. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, when are you going to have enough of that, you know? So let's do this. Let's open up the conversation to the rest of the class. That was a really robust fishbowl. And also let's think about, go ahead, Golden, go ahead.
I wanted to respond to something Justine said earlier about, she said something like, can we even like move past this? And I heard someone say this in a separate class I'm taking, but civilization has really existed for thousands of years, but racism has only existed in the hundreds. And we've existed without racism, and it's kind of the white man's doing to limit our perceptions of civilization and humanity. Like, we limit it to only the times that racism and colonialism has existed. So it's very possible for us to live without racism, since we've done it before and we did it for a long time. And but in a different way, the systems that we live in right now, I believe that it's impossible to change them in a way that's fully liberating for Black people and people of color and all oppressed classes. We would need to live in a separate system, or we need to break down and create our own forms of government and stuff that fits our needs, because just living within the same governments that were created by slave owners and people that created racism and slavery, we won't be able to live past this, because like police were one thing that was always created to put Black people down and bring free slaves back to slavery, and just in a way we can't move past these if we're still in these same systems. So that's all I was thinking about when Justine said that.
You know, thank you, Golden. You kind of sparked my mind. If you guys are willing, let's do like a 15-minute theoretical exercise, okay? And let's kind of play out Justine and Golden's premise. So can we get beyond this is the question that's posed. A response that was given by Golden, and I have to say, to some regard, I agree with, right? As things and as institutions are put in place now, no. So what the marginalized groups are going to have to do is kind of withdraw themselves and put themselves in a separate silo, if you will, to kind of create a balance, right? Brett had mentioned Tulsa, Oklahoma. Is everybody familiar with the Tulsa massacre? Is there anybody who's not familiar? Let me ask you. Okay, so so in the 1920s, there's a small portion of Oklahoma, that became one of the wealthiest communities, not only in the United States, but really in the world, right? One of their next moves was try to set up and establish international transport, okay? At the time, Oklahoma had 2 airports, right? Within what they call Black Wall Street, there was 11 private jets, okay? So this is the 1920s, right? The state has 2 airports. This community has 11 private jets. Black physicians, Black doctors, Black businessmen, Black banks, Black colleges, right? It's just, which we think of when we see like Wakanda, right? They was doing that shit in the 1920s in Oklahoma, right? Like this is where my grandmother is from, right? So the response to this was the first ever aerial bombing in United States history. I'm gonna say that one more time. The first ever aerial bombing, so bombs by air. They literally dropped bombs on this town and blew it to smithereens, right? Hundreds of people were killed. And more importantly, they stamped out the economic progress of this town called Black Wall Street in Tulsa, Oklahoma. If for those who are familiar with the show The Watchmen from HBO, the first show of that series, right, episode 1, depicts that, right? So this is this Black Wall Street notion. So now to take it back to our mental exercise, Golden is talking about separating and establishing communities such as these. For those who logged on earlier, I was playing some music, and the intro giving a speech was Louis Farrakhan from the Nation of Islam, right? That's their program. They say, we're gonna create a separate community and build up an economic power base for the Blacks and for marginalized groups, right? So this is what we're working through. So if, in this mental exercise, if we were to do that, right? Let's say we have this established. We are living in our Black Wall Street. We know how Black Wall Street ends. So how do we prevent our circumstance from becoming Black Wall Street? And that is the mental exercise I pose to y'all. So how will we defend our Black Wall Street? How will we defend our Wakanda? How will we stop aerial assaults, right? We know what the police department is. We know how they respond to us. So if we are able to establish what can be considered our maroon community, how do we sustain our community? I think, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. You're on mute though, Golden. Go ahead.
Okay. I don't know if I made it clear earlier, but I was more so considering like what Brett had like briefly mentioned. I don't know if he was joking, but like burning down or like ending everything. So I think that like you can't, and also because I think within it, I would like, if I'm envisioning my own like utopia where like everything's perfect, like I would end the state and we would give back the land to the indigenous populations, and there would be like, I think just you can't, I think just existing still on this stolen land is also something that I'm considering as like an issue if indigenous people don't have access to this land, don't have power over it. So I think I don't know if this is answering your question exactly, but I think just in some way we have to take away all the power that the US state has, and also end all their like military indictments in like other countries and stuff. So just, I'm thinking way too big right now, and I feel like I'm extending the conversation too far away, but like that's my perfect utopia, or that's my like where I see liberation existing is in that place.
I would agree with you. And I think if you study revolutionary theory, right, you think about Frantz Fanon, you think about Kwame Nkrumah, you think about Huey P. Newton, right? They would say the same thing. And to me, where I'm trying to focus the conversation is into this process of ending the state, right? How is that going to take, what is that going to look like, right? How do you materialize that? That's the, because you're not off, Golden. You're not thinking too big. I'm thinking there with you, but now I'm asking, yes, that's necessary, but how do we make that? How do we accomplish that? How do we bring that to a head, right? And that's the question I'm posing. How do you win the confrontation with the forces that be, with the police, with the military, with the National Guard, right? Because effectively, the documentary showed that they ran the police out of South Central. Like that happened, right? That's a fact, right? They literally pushed the police out of South Central. And what they did is they regrouped and they brought in the National Guard, right? So to establish this utopia that it sounds like a good majority of us in this class want to establish, we have to come to terms with the fact that there's going to be a confrontation with the state. So then the question becomes, how do you effectively engage in that confrontation?
Even the National Guard guys in the documentary were uneasy being there too, because the military is not intended to police American citizens. But when we go overseas, we start occupying, we start breaking all kinds of rules. But adding to your thing, because I know it's been tossed, well, not it's been tossed around, but the whole separate but equal. And it's like, how do we do that? But how do we maintain that we're equal, but yet we're separate? So it's a bigger picture that I really think needs to really be broken down and revisited, and then really discussed on like an intellectual level. Like, I don't know.
And not to fuck y'all up, right? But like, if we're really to engage in conversations around liberation, this is what needs to be discussed, right? When the Black Panthers were putting out the 10-point program, what do you think they were talking about, right? When they were saying we wanted to end police brutality, and they showed up when people were getting pulled over with guns, right? What do you think that they were thinking about, right? So what I'm trying to do is kind of to get our thinking to really take this question serious, right? Because quite literally, and I believe it's so, right? This cannot go on, right? Like, I think nobody would disagree with me. Like, this cannot continue the way that it's going, right? So if we are to take that into consideration, we have to look at all the elements at play. And if we're not doing that, then we're not really serious about these things changing. Like, just to call it what it is, right? If you study history, and I think one thing in this country, how many of y'all took a history class in your K through 12 education? A history class? Or did you take social science, right? I got social science. So what that is a socializing you to understand a version of history. You didn't get history, right? You get a socialization process. So it's a two-pronged approach, right? One is to disturb and disrupt and problematize this thing that we call history, that we think we know, right? That's on the educational realm. But then it's also the process of reimagining structures, right? How does things not have to be the way that they can be? And then if that's the case, how do we go about creating these new systems, right? Why is it radical that a system could be in place to where your food is met, everybody has meals, everybody has homes, right? Everybody has a decent job. There's so this is a country that literally prints its own money. Like, I could go to the printer right now, print out a piece of paper. That's how this country prints its money, right? So the fact that these things can't happen because of economics is untrue, right? So we have to really seriously think about these things. And then for you guys, you make film. Film moves this country, right? Like, in a century ago, it was the authors who moved the country, right? When King James was to put together the Bible, he gathered all the best writers of the time and compiled those people together to print the Bible, right? And R now is people who can make videos. So your ability to shape the world is profound. So your responsibility is far from minimal, right? And so where it becomes key is being able to take these type of analysis that we're having within this conversation and then apply it to your film production. Let me go back to the chat. Yes, the United States is a contradiction. I mean, the rules in the United States is a contradiction within itself. They make the rules, which they don't even follow. And then, yeah. But no, the fact that the currency isn't backed by anything, right? So it could, where in the past, money was backed by the gold standard. So you have a certain amount of gold to be able to print amount of dollar, like that's out of the water. So you could establish your currency how you so choose. Yeah. So let's open it up to other conversations. What are other people's thoughts about the documentary, or even the K-Town USA website, right? Where you can kind of see these different depictions or these different versions of what happened in '92.
I think it's interesting with the documentary is that like whenever you hear about like the riots, the Rodney King riots, you don't hear about Rodney King, you don't hear about what happened. You literally, like, I grew up not like just being kind of like confused. Like they'd say, oh, the LA riots, but like no one would explain like what actually happened. So I didn't really like learn about that. So I think like, I knew, but I didn't know, and I think there's something to that, because you said that it kind of, we learn social science. I think there's something, we need to learn that in school. We need to learn all these things because it's just, I mean, it's almost like, so many people I've talked to grow up not knowing like a lot of things that they're supposed to know, and then people will look back and they're like, you don't know. And I'm like, well, like we didn't learn these things.
Right.
And we're only they're only learning like a certain perspective. And I think with the classroom, like a lot of it begins in the classroom, you know? That's how these things are going to change. I mean, it's not the only way, but it's one of the biggest ways, because then people are going to grow up thinking that like the system is okay, that it's normal, you know, and that white privilege is okay, you know, like it's not. Another thing that I realized too is like when I was watching this, it all just like what everyone was saying, and Justine was just saying that it all sounds too familiar, like everything like they like that was in that documentary was basically like the way the media portrayed that is how they portrayed the Black Lives Matter protests in the summer. So it's just kind of like, I don't know, like especially with the cop kind of saying like, oh, well, if you don't want like protection,
Yeah.
like that's exactly what they said.
Yeah.
And nothing's changed, but needs to. But yeah.
Yeah, that was pretty profound to me, Tori, too. Like he literally just bullied, and I forget what they were in front of. I don't know who, legislature or who it was, but he told me like, yo, bro, I'm not about to protect y'all if you call us guilty. You know what I'm saying? And it's Pac who says it, right? The LAPD is the biggest gang, and that's how they move and operate. He just strong armed the legislative branch. I don't know whoever those people were. I don't remember, but he just strong armed them, right? Absolutely. Who else? Angel, why don't you go ahead and say what you typed in the chat, man? I think that's a good comment.
Yes. So when I was watching the documentary, I remember watching this film by the title Gook, and it's essentially about these two Korean brothers that own a shoe store, and how they, from their perspective, how the LA riots was. As you may recall, in the LA 92, it shows the Korean store owners essentially arming themselves to defend their stores. There's a scene in the movie where one of the Korean store owners explains that back in Korea, they're forced to join the military. And going back to the Battle of Algiers and their use of the radio, how the Koreans also used the radio to communicate to each other where the certain disruptions were or riots. So that's what I was just kind of remembering while watching the documentary, is how these different communities and the tensions between each other and essentially not understanding one another.
Yeah, and that's a very good point, Angel. And I think, and that's another reason why I added the Love Song for Latasha documentary, because it kind of exposes more the dynamics between those relationships and how they became contentious. But if you're paying attention, what it shows, a lot of those contentious relationships stem from just cultural nuances, right? The fact of looking someone in the eye, juxtaposed to not looking someone in the eye, right? It's a cultural nuance that wasn't understood that created tension. And I think also if you watch the K-Town website, or if you viewed that, depending on where that took you, you got to hear a lot of that also, right? But I also found phenomenal was the way that community responded in kind, right? The march that they had, I think it might have been Wilshire Boulevard or what have you, with the white bandanas, right? So like they really showed up as well. And then two, what we haven't really talked about, which is really profound in the films, was how the community responded and getting the city back together, right? Like it wasn't really no government agency that came in and did a cleanup. It was literally the people who lived in that community came out and cleaned up the community. The indigenous community coming out with I think they had like the brooms and the gloves, right? So just when you talk about hope and you talk about things being able to change, you've seen the people pull together and really start to put their imprint on the community. And to me, that's where that possibility and that potentiality lies. And I think where it becomes important is being able to utilize that force and utilize that mechanism on the quotidian in a daily basis, right? Not when something happens, then we pull together, but we're always pulled together. We're always moving at that capacity. So that way, if something happens, we're already in line, right? We're already in formation to do what we need to do. And I think because of the distractions that the state puts in play, the masses of the people aren't attentive to be able to come together like that, right? Yeah, that's just my rift. Who else? Someone we haven't heard from.
I'll go. I was really, yeah, incensed, kind of like what everyone was saying, is like the media portrayal of this incident and how it's, you know, similar to how they portray stuff today. Like one part that really riled me up and really like incensed me was when that reporter in the middle of the chaos going on was hounding some guy who was pushing a shopping cart of stuff. It was like, sir, do you know this is illegal? Sir, how can you do this? And it's like, you're a journalist. Why aren't you down in City Hall shoving your microphone in the leaders and saying, sir, why are you such a spectacular failure that your city's descended into chaos? Why are you such a loser that you allow murderers to walk free? You know what I mean? Like, it's like this, like the direction and the anger is not directed at those who are directly responsible for it. And it just like, no, that's not what media is supposed to do. That you're a journalist. You're supposed to hold those in power to account. And the whole situation is just a spectacular failure of leadership on every level, from federal to the state, to the county, to the city, to the people who are supposed to oversee the cops. Like, such a spectacular failure of leadership. Yet, as everyone has pointed out, what is the one thing everyone knows about the LA2 riots? Oh, the looters. Oh, it was looting and property damage. And it's like, no one talks about the beating of Rodney King. That video is disgusting. And no one talks. I didn't know about the murder of Latasha. I had no clue about that. That like riled me up. I was like, how come nobody talks about this when we talk about the LA riots? Like, a 15-year-old child was murdered. And that was another thing. When they were doing the trial, I was like, oh man, yeah, bitch is gonna get off. Watch, like, not guilty. And when they came back with guilty, I was like, oh snap. So like, why is this in here then? What's gonna happen? And then the fucking judge, you know, I know criminals and you know, no jail time. And I immediately thought of Brock Turner. Yeah. And it's amazing how these judges can look at certain people and see themselves there, but for the grace of God go I. So I know that you're like me and you're not a criminal, you know what I mean? And it just kind of like really made me think of that. And it's like, this bitch, I feel like we could single-handedly blame her for the whole incident. You know what I mean? Like, she was like the catalyst that started this. And then like, again, the media portrayal with like the cops, like the coddling they got. And it's the same thing that you see today. Like, why aren't media hounding the cops that murdered Breonna Taylor, or that joke of a DA, or was it the attorney general who lied to the jury? But no, instead they're on the ground with the people who are protesting, or the people who are quote unquote looting, and like, you know, demanding answers from them. And it's like, no, like the whole LA riots is such a prime example of a spectacular failure of leadership and of just all that anger, man. Like, it just, like, seeing those people like pulled out on the street and be like, that was really hard to watch. And it made me angry, because it's just like, man, like, I don't want violence, of course, but it's like, nah, dude, it's like city officials that should be pulled out in the street and held to account, you know, not innocent poor people who just happen to be on that wrong intersection at that wrong time, you know? And it's just, again, like everyone else has reiterated, it also kind of just depressed me, because here we are almost 30 years later and nothing has changed. Tamir Rice, you know, like, how do you look at, like, we see these videos that are so clear as day and nothing. but yeah, that's just kind of like all the thoughts that I had when I was watching both those documentaries.
I feel your emotion through the internet, Crystal. Yeah, I hear it. I hear it. I feel you. And now I'm kind of looking at the chat conversation also. And what Tori's saying, that kind of makes me think about Baldwin's pillars of white inferiority, right? The maintenance of white innocence and the media's role in ensuring that this innocence gets maintained. Random side note, I had mentioned OJ earlier. So y'all know this is why he got off, right? Like just to call it what it is, right? So think about the temporality of this. So we have Rodney King situation, we have our Tasha Hardin situation, we have the rebellion, and then this fool OJ do the shit that he do, right? And let's be real, I'm gonna be real. I'm gonna give y'all some insight from the Black community, right? We knew this motherfucker killed that. We knew, you know what I'm saying? But just because of all the things that goes on, right? We understood this as here we go again, right? Here we go again. Although the evidence was shaky, right? Like, but you know, here we go again. So I believe that the state was attentive to what they just gone through, right? It's like 3 years after 2 years really after the whole situation, right? So we gonna just let this one go so we don't have to deal with that, right? And to me, and the bigger takeaway from that, the power of the people, right? Like you literally swayed public opinion, right? And it's terrible that was wasted on OJ. Could have went to somebody way more deserving. But again, you know, you see the power of the collective. And to me, I think more than anything, that's what should be the takeaway, right? Like in our now, we're conditioned to view things from an individual standpoint. Your success is for you, right? It's not for anyone else but you. And at most, right, it's for your family. At most, that would be the biggest extension that you would get, right? But what would it mean if you determine success for how it impacts others also? How differently would the world operate if we view success from that standpoint, right? So again, and I think implicitly what we're touching on also is this notion of capitalism, right? One of the tenets of capitalism is individualism, right? It's this notion of putting profit before people, right? Certain segments of the population are able to access capital. That was what the whole 1% protest was about, right? So this notion of individualism, this notion of value being placed on property, right? Value being placed on profit. These are all capitalist tendencies and byproducts of this system that we operate under, which is capitalism, right? So when we start talking about reimagining new systems, that has to be included as well, right? Because a lot of systems of oppression are tied to the accumulation of capital, right? Eric Williams has a book called Capitalism and Slavery, and he talks about how the whole institution of slavery was developed for the capture of capital, right? He talks about when you think about Wall Street, the first commodities traded on Wall Street were African people. Those were the first stocks, right? The first stockbrokers were the people who would facilitate the exchange of the enslaved to the enslaver, right? So this whole economic system is founded on a system of oppression, right? So when you talk about reimagining and rethinking this way of living, you can't leave the economic proportion out of the picture. One, that's probably one of the first things to be addressed, right? Because especially in this society. Other thoughts?
Adding to what you're saying about O.J. Simpson, I know when I was a kid, there was a O.J. I don't know if you've seen it, O.J. Simpson documentary on HBO. It happened like 90. It came out like 96 or 97. And it's funny because white people were so mad that O.J. was found not guilty. And I'm paraphrasing what one of the Black commentators said, that the first time a Black man was found innocent in the laws that you made to oppress us, and you don't like it. Yeah. And it was just so heated.
Yeah.
I'm trying to find it right now so I can watch it again, but it's really good. It's an old school one.
I think I do remember it because for some reason I just remember them showing him put on the glove as like one of the core shots of the documentary. I do, and actually too, FX did a pretty good remake of the whole circumstance with the
Oh yeah, People versus OJ with
OJ. Yeah, that was pretty.
that one's good.
Yeah, it was. It was. Cuba Gooding Jr. did a hell of a job playing OJ. Anybody else?
I got something, just something small that kind of reminded me of when we were talking about the looting.
Mhm.
Like it just like the whole, like I don't know why, but it just this one part from Always Sunny in Philadelphia, it stuck in my mind where they were talking about looting, and they were showing two videos. There was one from Hurricane Katrina, and one from the Watts riots, and they were saying which one's looting and which one's rioting, and it was a joke because like it was supposed to be a joke, but it just made me thought like basically like people who like if you see like a store breakdown, if you see the doors are breaking down, they're like, oh, that's looting, no matter what. But they don't really see like the riots itself. Like people aren't like just stealing like TVs, they're not stealing like radio, they're stealing like what they need because a lot of people they couldn't afford it or they couldn't like get some of the things, so they use the opportunity to like help themselves for like because the whole time like I just remember my dad when he was here in LA when the riots were happening, he didn't go out and steal like TVs and stuff. He stole food because we didn't have enough money to buy a whole bunch of food for our family.
And I would even call that stealing, right? I mean, at best we could call it commandeering, but shit, he went shopping. You know what I'm saying? Like, I mean, but then to your point, Matthew, right? The role of the media, and it was said earlier, right? The media can shape who's looting and who's doing whatever, right? When there's sports games that go on and teams win hockey championships and everybody's in the streets tearing up shit, nobody calls that looting, right? You know what? Another thing that I kind of tripped out too, like it was kind of convenient, right? The looting. I mean, people were saying, "Excuse me," you know what I'm saying? Everybody was kind of working together in that. It was orderly chaos in a sense, right? Like that was something that kind of was impressed upon me too. But then a certain part of it looked like scenes from The Dark Knight or something, like just the chaos of it all, the fires and everything like that. It was purely pandemonium. Who else?
Sorry, it got me to think about something. It might be a little off topic, but I don't think so. Because you mentioned this about money and you know, how people, you know, they'll focus on the looting and everything, but the same people that are focusing on the looting are the same people that criticize other people who don't have money for not eating right or not eating like I mean, I don't have anything against veganism, but like there are people that will like there are certain people that will throw like their healthy lifestyle in other people's faces with judgment. And I think it kind of like it ties into a lot of the topics we've been talking about in class, like gentrification as well. And then this as well, because they're the same people that will be like, oh, look at these looters, and then they'll just hold on to that, like, oh, look at these businesses that are being ruined, how dare you steal food, you know, and yet they'll criticize you for not being able to afford it. So
yeah, that's a really good point. Actually, you made me think about a passage that W.E.B. Du Bois wrote in the book of The Souls from Black Folks. I'm gonna paraphrase it, right? To be poor is one thing, right? But then to be poor in a society of wealth is the bottomest of the bottoms, right? So again, to be poor is one thing, but then to be poor amongst a society of wealth is the lowest of the lows or the bottom of the bottom. And like, think about how LA is constructed, right? We don't even talk about all of LA. Let's just take downtown, for instance, right? Where literally you have one street of Skid Row, you go 2 blocks over, it's the Staples Center in LA Live, right? So what type of psychological effect does that have on you when you are literally getting food from off the ground, right? And you see people driving by in Maseratis, right? You see people throwing food away, right? Like the distinction between disparity and opulence is so drawn out here, and the demarcation line is so thin that it's no wonder that things like just that fact alone is no wonder that people are rebelling, right? And I think it was one cat when they were talking about how the rebellion was starting to go up north, and he was saying how, you know, it's way bigger than Rodney King, right? You have people who put in 60-hour work weeks for bosses who only work 2 hours and pat them on the back of the head and tell them to go on, right? So just the social conditions, right? And the thing about this too, in LA is one of the most expensive places to live, right? So what you have to put yourself through just to pay your bills, just to maintain yourself is a lot, right? And then to see all this opulence around, we're in Hollywood, right? And people carry this Hollywood lifestyle. Motherfuckers who ain't even in Hollywood act like they in Hollywood, right? You try to go to a club, go out to enjoy yourself, they're judging you by the way you're dressed, right? So this LA culture compounds the notion of poverty so strong, right? So it's really no wonder that people are out in the street trying to take some shit when the opportunity comes, right? It makes sense that there's a hustle culture in LA, right? One of the core components of gang banging is the hustle, right? It's about economics, it's about survival. So again, to take it back to something I mentioned earlier, how devastating would it be to give people food, clothes, shelter, just as a base, right? Because you're born, you get that, right? How many empty homes do we have right now with people on the street? Celebrities got 3, 4, 5 homes. I got one for the summer, one for the winter, one for the fall. But there's people starving, right? It's 2 people in the home, the house got 13 rooms, right? So these are things, when we talk about reimagining, these are the things that, that need to go within this process of reimagining. Let's take a couple more comments, preferably from, go ahead, Goldie.
I was thinking about the looting conversation, about how in Philly a few weeks ago, there's a Walmart that was looted, and I saw it all over Twitter. But during the and people were like upset about it, some people weren't. But Walmart during the pandemic, like the family that owns it, they made like $60 billion or some number that I can't even imagine. And Walmart constantly exploits their workers and stuff, and isn't like that's stealing from their workers. They're stealing labor, they're stealing hours. And why don't we frame these billionaires who are becoming immensely wealthy? Like I don't even know how to imagine 60 billion. I don't know how to imagine that figure, but they're making all this money and they can get upset over one store being looted by some families who probably are getting stuff that they need, or even if they don't need, like it's crumbs for them. Like they have all this wealth, why does it matter?
And that shit is insured. It's insured. So what? They don't pay you out anyway. You know what I mean? All right, who else? Give us 2 more and we'll call it a day. Preferably from somebody who we haven't heard from. Or I could call on you, it's up to you.
I guess I'll say something.
All right.
I think you guys have touched on it, but I was just gonna say that Daryl Gates, he's a joke. Like he's an absolute joke. Like he's a clown, man. Like the fact he did some real like Trump-esque childish type shit when he was on the stand and he was talking to the council members or whatever, and he was like, and then he's like, the council member had to really like ask him again to clarify, like, is that a threat to like the city of Los Angeles? And like that right there alone just kind of tells you the type of power that the police department has. Cause he's like, shit, if you want, he said, like basically saying, I know what these people are capable of, and if you want to take it there, we'll just let all hell break loose. And like what Crystal was saying, like, bro, you are held accountable for some shit that like anyone else isn't. Like you have a type of position that you need to, act on and be the right person, be a fucking leader, bro. Like, but yeah, that was crazy to me, man. Like that was a joke. And then what else was it? Something else I was gonna say. Oh yeah, that's right. That's what it was. My fault. I lost my train of thought for a second. Going back to what I believe you, Brett, and Golden were speaking on about like the that question, like that thesis you like kind of put out for the class to like I guess address or whatever. I would say like I don't know, like because I agree what you're saying with the whole like what do we do to protect this form of like, you know, liberation for us for what we want. But I guess I would say, like, I don't know if it's like kind of right, because it's, you know, I wouldn't say not right or wrong, but like, you know, most people see it kind of like extreme, but like kind of what you were saying to like the Malcolm X approach, like have a separate state, like you kind of have to start like a separate world that's like strictly just like for Black people, like you said, Black banks, Black hospitals and stuff like that. But I like, in the way, I don't know like if it's the way to like make it work, but I would say like form your own like kind of declaration, your own constitution to that form. But like you're saying that in today's society, it's hard to do something like that, because in a progressive world where we're working, it's more about bringing all worlds together and not just like separate. You know, that was kind of like, back then it was like a black and white thing. Now it's like, it's still that, but it's much more, there's more to America than just black and white at this point. You know what I'm saying? So that's kind of like a hard approach to go. But I don't know. Like, that question was a really good question. It had me thinking a lot. I was trying to figure out something to like kind of put on it, but I don't know. I mean, I think like, you know, another way was like you said, the Huey Newton approach, like to protect was like, you know, shit, arm yourself if need be, like, you know, if that's the way to take it. But I don't like how a lot of other people were saying, and also just hearing some stuff like on some Malcolm X stuff I've been like listening to, is like, I don't really promote violence. Like, you know, being a person that played football and fought my cousins and got in fights in the street, like now I'm kind of this phase where it's like, I don't really promote violence to that extent, especially on the level of burning and stuff, like, and like beating people. But do I understand it? Yeah, I understand it. You know, I do get it. But I don't know. Like, I don't know exactly. I'm still trying to think of an answer to your question.
Can I ask you a question, Tyler?
Yeah.
What's the difference between violence and self-defense?
I think it's the form, like the form it comes in, like kind of what Crystal was saying. Like, I don't think it's to the extent of just going out and beating people up, but like we've also, like, you know, Black people, we've been beaten up our whole lives, like whether it's physically or, you know, emotionally, mentally, from you know, the system, just in general and stuff like that. But I don't know if it's like, how do I say, I don't know, like, because I mean, like, you know, then you could go back and say the whole video of Rodney King was a form of violence, you know, like, you know, that's like, you know. But I don't know, man. It's like, it's tough. I don't know. I mean, I can't, you know.
And I think one way to look at it, right, and it's not the way, but it's one way to look at it. If you got a bully that's been fucking with you your whole school career, right? He's been in your grade from kindergarten to high school. He's been beating your ass the whole time, right? And if you get your weight up in 12th grade and you defend yourself, is that violent? Right? Nah, that's within your divine human right to do, right? And it, although it's a hyperbole, it's a metaphorical, but the situation is no different. I think the only difference is we ain't the oppressed, and it's beyond black and white, because it's not just Black folks who are oppressed now, right? So the oppressed, we just haven't got our weight up yet, right? And once we get the weight up, then we can determine what is violent and what is not, right? So to me, I think the question should, the focus should be is getting the weight up, right? Collectively as oppressed people. Whether the how, you know, that's more of a big question. So that, yeah, right, you're right, Leonardo. One more and we'll call it a day. Samantha, what are your thoughts on the documentary, the two documentaries or the website?
I mean, going off of like some of the stuff that we were talking about before, like Golden was mentioning the like all the like capitalist stuff with like companies like stealing money, just like connecting back to that conversation, like it really just like what I've been thinking about through all of like what we've been talking about today is just like the like the hypocrisy of it all, and that like why is like it okay to like for like white people to steal and like white rich people to steal money from their workers who are doing all the work for them, and they're not really doing anything up higher up. But then the second that anyone tries to take back their own power, that's immediately like inherently violent or inherently like whatever they say about like looters and rioters and all that, and even just like the titling it of rioting rather than titling it a protest, that's all, you know, a little fucked up. And then also like you were asking like what's the difference between violence and self-defense, and I was kind of in my head relating that to like in comedy, the concept of like punching up or punching down, that like you can make fun, you can make jokes at the expense of like a group that has marginalized your group, but like it's not obviously not okay for people like for a white person to make jokes at black people's expense, or you know straight people to make fun of gay people or anything like that. But once it's switched around, it is like kind of understood within like the community of comedy or whatever that like those kind of jokes are okay. And I think that's like also the difference between like violence and self-defense, is that like if something is being done towards a group that is already marginalized and already then that seems more of like that is violence. And then if it's being done by the marginalized group to take back their own power, then that's like self-defense.
So
If that makes sense.
just looking at the chat, Samantha, did you want to address Leonardo's comment? Because he says, is it like a double standard? Or not?
Oh, I was on mute, sorry. Yeah, no, I think that like the double standards are definitely like really like inherent, like really obviously like present in our society right now. But I think that like the like at least like with everything that happened this summer, and like the like younger generations and older generations are coming to more of an understanding about like what's happening right now, and like there's more knowledge being spread, particularly because of like the internet and the capability to spread knowledge so easily. And I think that like now that we're starting to address those double standards that are so present in like every single aspect of life, that's you know really important. And I think that you know Leonardo said tell that to the school system. Like yeah, the double standards in the school system are also like really fucked up.
Leonardo, is that what you meant by the double standard? I didn't want to speak for you, but I think you brought up something interesting.
Yeah, I don't know if I was addressing that in the way that you meant.
Okay, cool. So one of the things I was listening to you guys, I thought about as it pertains to looting. So what y'all think about like the Louvre, right? What about these huge museums with all these artifacts from cultures that aren't theirs? How is that not looting, right? So there's a very big thing going on right now where there's a African activist who's literally walking into these museums, snatching up the artifacts and trying to walk out of the museums, right? So he's reclaiming what's his off the premise that y'all stole this from us, right?
That's the guy that they're calling himself the real life Killmonger.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep. So this notion of looting, right, and who can and who cannot loot is very interesting, especially when you think about really big global ideas like art, right, and whose art is valuable and who could hold the art, right? So what we'll close out our day with. So I'm thinking about some ways to go with next week, right? I placed it the Black Panther Vanguard of the Revolution. That's from PBS. That is a very good documentary. But then we kind of have some things on the table through our conversation today, right? One, gangs and the way that they've kind of were birthed and the purpose that they serve in the community. So there's a very dope documentary called Bastards of the Party that kind of articulates how gangs birthed from the Black Panther Party and kind of the evolution and the genealogy of Black gangs in South Los Angeles. And that will keep us within LA. That's one option. And then kind of within the question that I posed, right? How do we defend this utopia, or how do we engage the state to establish our utopia? There's a film entitled, from a book entitled Spook Who Sat by the Door. Has anybody heard of that?
That's a movie also, right?
The movie, yes, sir. Yeah. Right. Do you know like the premise a little bit?
Is it? I took a Pan-African class, and it was a lot about there was a lot of movies involving the blaxploitation era. I might be, is that the one where the Black guy goes to the CIA and he becomes with the Chicago?
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
yeah,
so
it's good. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah. So essentially, there's the first Black man to ever join the CIA. He defects from the CIA and establishes these urban guerrilla cells that engage in guerrilla war with the state, right? With the National Guard, with the police department, etc. It is it's a fictional, it's not a real story, right? It's an adaptation from a book, but it kind of gets into these themes and is very similar to what you see in Battle of Algiers. So those are 3 directions that we could kind of go with the course. I wanted to kind of leave it up to you guys to see which way you wanted to take next week's conversation. Yeah.
Adding to Professor, I haven't seen it yet. I saw the advertisement. There's a documentary on PBS called Driving While Black. It looks really good. So I still need to check that out.
Okay. The name of the last one was The Spook Who Sat by the Door. Is the name of the last one. Driving While Black is what. So yeah, it's up to you guys. We could do what's already up, talking about the Black Panthers, the vanguard of the revolution. The other option is the bastards of the party, talking about how the Black Panthers birthed what we now know as gangs of LA. And then the third option would be Spook Who Sat by the Door, talking about the urban guerrilla war tactics that were engaged, that some of the Black Panther parties did participate in. Like that's also, although it's adaptation and it's fiction, but there are real circumstances of that really happening, right? So yeah, what would you guys prefer to do?
I'm down for whatever, whichever works. Yeah.
What I could do, so if we do the vanguard of revolution, right, I could assign the Spook Who Sat by the Door as like extra credit viewing, because they kind of go hand in hand. Or we could just jump into the bastard of the party with the gangs.
I kind of want to do the bastard of the party.
Party gangs. Anybody else feeling more inclined to the gangs?
Yeah, me too.
All right. Yeah. Matthew. Okay. So I'll post bastards of the party, excuse me, on our Google Classroom site. It is on YouTube, so you'll be able to see it there, but I'll post the YouTube link. And it kind of keeps us in the same time. It also keeps us in the same locale, it's local to us. So yeah, that'll be the project for next week. I'll definitely post that. I'll throw some readings that will be optional. One, definitely kind of familiarize yourself with the Black Panther 10-point program. That would be good to be kind of aware of. So that way, although we're not focusing on it specifically, but you kind of see what they were driving at, right? And you can see how this gets morphed into what gang culture becomes. Is there any other questions, comments for me, or anything you guys have?
Oh, sorry. So we watched the documentary, and then as you said, the readings are optional.
Optional, yeah. So just we'll discuss the documentary for sure. So have that watched, and I may infuse some of the material from the readings in conversation, but the majority of the reading will be the majority of the conversation will be the documentary, and the readings are just to provide deeper context of the forces that kind of drove Black Panther. Yes, please be journaling for these documentaries. So you should have a journal for LA 92. And so you could journal on LA 92 or the Latasha Harding documentary or the website. It's totally up to you. But you want to journal for this week and then journal for next week's documentary. And then the following week, of course, there's no course. But please, please, please be meeting with your group so that way you guys can have your projects in order when the time comes. I'm personally looking forward to viewing those. Also, if you guys have questions about the film festival, let me know and I can make sure I get the waiver to you guys so that way you don't have to pay to submit. All right, you guys, stay safe, stay healthy, be well, and I will see you next week.
Bye. Have a good one.
Thank you.
too.
Have a
Thank you.
good week.
Thank you.
Have a good weekend.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Justine or Isaac, do you guys, okay, Justine, you have any questions? Are you okay?